Hello, my name is Naledi Cabo of the Africa Tourism Association. Welcome to Africa Travels Week's discussion around the future of Africa travel, embracing the African diaspora. The pandemic has forced the industry to revisit old norms and become more innovative. While appreciation of the diaspora travel market has grown, targeted engagement is still lagging. Today, we'll discuss our brands and destination marketing efforts in line with what the research indicates as it pertains to spending power in the interests of the diaspora, and how can we better develop an understanding of the market and employ practical and authentic solutions. Today's panel is a global one, representing Ghana Tourism Authority, Women in Travel, Connaissance Development, Erin Journal, and the Black Travel Alliance. I recommend you take the time to read all our panelists' impressive bios, because we are going to jump right into what I know will be a very compelling conversation. Without further delay, allow me to hand the conversation over to Paula Franklin, a global communications leader and co-founder of the collective And Travel is Better in Color. Paula, over to you.
Welcome, everyone. It is lovely to see all of your faces. I'm going to jump in with Tomiko. I want to talk a little bit about numbers. So at this point, we all know that the Black diaspora has a huge spending power. There's been studies, we've seen the statistics, they're often referenced in media coverage. And what I would love to hear from you is, do you think that this data is being effectively used to market to the diaspora?
I don't think that, I don't think that it's being effectively used, because I don't think that travel brands really understand what those numbers mean and how they can use them strategically to market to the diaspora. I mean, it's a huge number. US travelers is 109 billion. You add in international travel into that, it goes up to 129 billion. If you add in the UK and Ireland, it's another 8 billion. And so when you have those large numbers, have they really dug in deep to really understand how to market to that group of people and how to do it strategically, so that they're not just sort of, trying to figure out, throwing it up against a wall, hoping that something works. We know that solo travel is huge, and we know that a great majority of Black travelers, they spend 24% spend on luxury travel. But the thought process is that more white travelers spend money on luxury, and that's not the case. So if you don't really understand those numbers and how to delve deep into that and understand how to market to that group, it sort of just is a big number and you don't know what to do with it.
Do you think, just as a quick follow-up, is there anyone that's done it well that you can think of? You can say no.
I don't think anyone has done it well. I don't, because I think that the number is so huge, they're still trying to digest it. And again, if the way you've been going to market for, the entire time is one way, it's hard. It starts with the leadership. So they have to really understand and be intentional about their marketing materials. We know that Black people travel when they see themselves reflected. And most of the marketing material, we're not reflected in it. So they have to be intentional about their hiring practices and the leadership within the travel brands. And if you don't have that, then, it's still just a huge number that brands aren't really sure what to do with. They see the number and they're like, oh my gosh, wow, that's a huge number. How do we reach those people? But then it stops there.
Yeah. Thank you. And Jamie, I'm going to move on to you. The tourism conversation tends to focus on North America, the North American diaspora. What does this look like through a Caribbean or European lens?
That's an interesting one. I'm based in the UK, and I predominantly have worked with a lot of destinations, particularly the Caribbean Tourism Organization, and some other Caribbean, Grenada, Tobago, doing campaigns with them, trying to help, open up the diaspora market. So it's the same situation, really. The diaspora market is under kind of represented in travel marketing. It was something I realized really early out when I started my agency. And it was that they weren't marketing to this profitable segment. It was like we had a ready-made audience right there, but we weren't connecting and speaking to them directly. And it almost kind of brings up this relationship between, is it the responsibility of the tourist board or is it responsibility of the high commissions? Because they're essentially the ones that are supposed to kind of like rally the diaspora and keep that connection and that support and that engagement happening so that it makes an easier process for the tourism boards. So now I'm seeing that there needs to be a real symbiotic relationship between the two of them in order for a campaign of a diaspora campaign to really work, particularly here in the UK market I'm speaking about. So yeah, there have been some strides made in terms of destinations thinking about the diaspora market more strategically as an audience. We had Grenada. I definitely have to pinpoint them as a destination that has put a real focus and a strategy toward an investment, that's a key point, towards really engaging with the diaspora market in the UK market, you know, and I think when it comes, we look at the diaspora, and I think a big question for our brands all the time is, how do I engage or how do I connect with them? How do I really connect with them? And what I've found from the work that I've done is that it starts with building that community relationship. So really supporting, really getting involved in the individual community. So for example, my accent, you may hear, I'm from Barbados. So I've done some work with like the Barbados National Tourist Association, the National Association of Barbados. So they're essentially the diaspora agency. They bring together all the various different associations and, you know, putting on events that really help to engage that third and fourth generation, because essentially they have loads of different options. They're the ones that have the increase in spending, they got increase in education, they're technologically savvy, so they're online, and Europe, they're based in UK, so Europe is their doorstep. How do we really connect and engage with them and encourage them back to the Caribbean islands? So that's I hope it's kind of answered your question, but it's a little bit about, you know, it's connecting with the communities. It's really building in programs and authentic programs and initiatives that speak to them. You know, they're highly influenced by influencer marketing, and I know we've got Ghana on the call, so they'll be able to speak a lot more about the work that they did with influencer marketing and their campaign. So yeah, I mean, we still have lots of work to do. There's a big number, as Tomiko said, and brands are still really struggling to see destinations, particularly are really struggling to see how to connect and engage with them. But I think it starts with creating a symbiotic relationship between the high commissions and the tourist boards, and really getting into the communities and having educational initiatives to educate about your destinations and teach the younger generations about that cultural connection that they have.
I think it's key point. Investment is key.
Investment's very important, because we know, you know, they've traditionally not included us in farm trips and and these various different things, and to have budget put aside for that. And that's why I call Grenada specifically, because, you know, they dedicated funds to having a diaspora, not just from the UK market, but from I think they did one from the US market as well, you know, where it was just influencers from, you know, Black Americans or Black British. They included those influencers in the campaigns, and it worked because our Black people, I mean, I think there's a Nielsen study, I can't remember the exact figure, but there's a that says we're really influenced by, you know, influencer marketing and seeing ourselves in these photos, and we are technologically savvy. So influencer marketing strategy is a no-brainer when trying to connect with, you know, Black travelers, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm going to dot around the globe and go to Mimi, who's in Lagos, and you have sort of created, I would almost call it a unicorn of a magazine that is both beloved by the diaspora and within Africa. And so I want to ask you specifically is how, number one, how do you suggest that media platforms kind of engage with the global diaspora, and how do they speak to multiple, do we call us subgroups? I'll say subgroups, but what are your thoughts on engaging with this global diaspora?
On what was said by,
okay,
great. I was going to piggyback on what was said by Jamie and Tomiko, in the sense that representation is very important. That the people in the diaspora, they want to see themselves, they want to see their countries, they want to see their culture being presented in a way that would be appreciated on a global lens. And that is what we try to do with INRI Journal. You know, when it comes to travel and travel stories, it's the obvious tropes, the obvious locations. And yes, that's important, but you know, it's then saying that these particular countries and cities are where you think of when it comes to travel. And unfortunately, Africa has been excluded. And you know, the African diaspora is huge. So with Lagos, what we found was that, you know, even Americans and people, African Americans, also Nigerian Americans, British Nigerians, were buying the Lagos issue because they were finding that this is my city. I haven't even been there in a long time, and I'm getting to read and know about all of these stories that I've heard from family members. And you just have a bit of a connection to home. And which is why I say a cultural connection is very important. If you want to get people in diaspora to travel, if you want to engage them, you have to build their trust. And if you're building their trust, you know, I guess connect with them on a level that they would understand and that they would see with visuals, with stories, with ideas, and let them feel like they're included and they're part of the process. And you'd find that these urges to travel wouldn't be so far-fetched. It would now be something like, okay, actually, I want to go back home. I've read about this. I've seen all these stories, and for my own self, I want to experience it.
And what do you, as a quick follow-up, where do you think the next cities are specifically for the diaspora market? You know, I know many of us are not running straight to the safari camps of Tanzania. So where else, you know, where do you think we're going to go next, or where do you think we should go next?
When it comes to traveling Africa, it's places where the infrastructure is already set up. So, you know, it's easier to travel there because maybe there are direct flights, or they're kind of investing in tourism. So, you know, Rwanda, I've heard loads of people saying amazing things about Rwanda. I know a number of people have been, you know, looking and thinking to travel to Rwanda to see what's available there. I don't know why, but I've just been reading a little bit more about Maputo. I know Maputo might be a bit difficult to connect to with regards to, you know, have to go down to South Africa before you can get another flight to go to Maputo. But people are just, they're eager and keen to explore. So if there's an airline or so, or maybe the visa policies are not as stringent, it's a bit more relaxed. It's easier for you to get a visa if you need to get a visa. I think those things alongside the stories will inform people's decision to want to travel and to visit these places.
Yeah, I think Maputo was actually was one of my plans that was killed because of COVID. So it's interesting that you mentioned that one. And Harriet, can I ask you, you know, just speaking of, you know, my quick sort of mention of COVID, as we all sort of are thinking about traveling again and we sort of see this light at the end of the tunnel, what are your plans to re-engage with this diaspora market, and how do you think that other brands, tourism boards should do the same? What's next?
Okay, well, yeah, that's great. I've been having lots of conversation as far as the diaspora. You know, I also represent Cape Verde for the state of Illinois, and you know, as far as travel to Cape Verde and speaking with folks there. But as someone who was, I'm going to use the term Indigenous African American, you know, those who are, you know, who are descendants of enslaved Africans without, you know, stopping through the Caribbean. And, you know, I agree with everyone on the call who's mentioned, you know, targeted marketing for the diaspora. You know, we see a lot of African Americans, they go to the Caribbean, you know, for travel. They don't come to Africa because, you know, we don't see a lot of tourism ads or a lot of targeted marketing to Black lettered organizations or other types of entities. So there a lot more marketing needs to occur. But but there are also two other things that I want to say that's maybe provocative. Training. When I think about my first time traveling on the continent, second country, but first time traveling on the continent, it was right after, you know, Black Americans, again, talking about Black Americans in India, we experience, we have different experiences in this country. And sometimes you want to travel, and Black Americans want to travel to the Caribbean, want to travel to a country where people aren't looking at them, you know, for their skin color. And of course, Africa would be a place of respite as well. So a few months before traveling to the continent, I had an encounter with an intoxicated white man who pointed his finger to me and said, bang, bang, go back to Africa. And so, I go to Africa 3 months later, and I am in a market in a West African country, and an art vendor, he, summons me to his table with his wooden artifacts. And he says, my niece, come look at everything that I have here. You may know where this is going. And I look at the next stall. There's someone who has the exact same wooden art. So I'm, perusing. I go to the next stall, and he tells me to go back to America. And where am I to go as an African American? Should I be dropped off somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean where my ancestors are at as well? So in addition to, I say that to say, we need more of the campaign that Ghana implemented. We need more of the return home, but we also need that training within the tourism industry. We've heard stories. We have all probably experienced stories similar to that, whether we're from the continent, whether we're from the Caribbean or from Europe or the Americas. We've probably experienced situations like that of people treating different travelers a certain kind of way. But yeah, more marketing to African Americans, understanding buying power, and more welcome home campaigns. In addition to that, because and I think I was speaking to you a little bit about this earlier, because African Americans can't, when they're feeling, racism in the United States, they can't run to Barbados or Bahamas or places to get that break. Sometimes we go to Atlanta to get that break. Many of us have gotten our DNA, and we see that we're like, 27% Nigerian and 16% from Mali. And we hope that we can go there one day. Some of us do. But, maybe with these campaigns, again, some countries are talking about it. Perhaps, we can talk about citizenship as well. So I'm going to stop right there. These are longer conversations, things that I've been pondering with lots and lots of people. But these are ways that we can, think through campaigns of attracting the African-American diaspora.
Yes, thank you. I hadn't heard the indigenous Black American before. That was interesting. I think that was actually a great lead up to Year of Return. And I see Ekwesi has joined us. And I think, Ghana's Year of Return, which for anyone who doesn't know, was 2019. In March, 400 years since the start of the transatlantic slave trade. And I think it's often seen as this sort of amazing feat by the Ghana Tourist Board. I found just, to talk about me for a second, I found it super interesting how people found out about it. I went after a conference and did a day trip to the Cape Coast, which I don't suggest, definitely stay longer. But I was added to a tour group of Black folk from, mostly from the South, and they had all found this tour guide who I used through sorority groups, church groups, and Instagram. And it just was so, me as a publicist, amazing. They had found this return home cause without any buy-in from like the white American media. And I thought, one, it was beautiful and fascinating. It just sort of shows that, we can exist and we make a way, and we'll figure this out, regardless of support. And so I want to hear all about your return. So Ekwesi, my first question is, can you give us some background on the decision leading up to it, and why you decided to target the Black diaspora specifically?
All right, so Ghana has always had this Pan-African legacy as part of its key attributes. I mean, if you take our first president, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who led Ghana to independence as the first African state south of the Sahara to have independence, to his role in inviting people like Marcus Garvey, W. Du Bois and co to Ghana, George Padmore and co, to our role in the formation of the Organization of African Union, now AU. So we've always had this Pan-African legacy. In the year 1992, Ghana started the Pan-African Festival of Arts and Theatre, PANAFest. And so that also really positioned us as that African country where the African diaspora can come to. In 2007, there was a project, the Joseph Project, which was situated on the biblical Joseph being one who was sold by his brothers into slavery and later became Prime Minister of Egypt. And that Joseph Project was also asking our brothers and sisters to come back to the motherland to help in the development of the continent. Fast forward to 2019, and in 2018, thereabout, we saw opportunity with the commemoration of the 400th year of the first enslaved African arriving in the then Virginia. We then started putting ideas together, working with different groups. And like what you said, instead of just focusing on traditional media, we decided to engage with the various groups, church groups, various African-American groups, because we always knew that Ghana was that transit point. I mean, in as much as a lot of people didn't necessarily come from Ghana, Ghana was that transit point with all the castles and forts and dungeons on our coast. And so that became an emotional connection that we felt we could draw on. And so taking a cue from HR 1242, celebrating 400 years of African-American history, we also decided to use it as a period for commemoration of that activity and also celebrate African resilience. 400 years later, from chains, we now had crowns. And so we said, let's create that platform for everybody. So far as you're an African, no matter where you came from, you need to come back to Ghana. Initially, we started it as a homecoming, and then we said, let's make it a whole year of return. So you chose when you wanted to come. Ghana was welcoming, Ghana was home. And indeed, it caught fire, if I should put it that way. So in terms of numbers, in terms of mileage, in terms of the real connection that we wanted to establish, we probably couldn't have planned this. I mean, it was all over. People were really genuinely interested in visiting the motherland. And to that extent, I think it was a very successful campaign. And that is why towards the end of the campaign itself, we started the Beyond the Return initiative, which is a 10-year project looking at a decade of African Renaissance. Because now we've commemorated the 400 years. It was a painful past, but we're looking to the future with hope that let's connect, let's build, let's find ways that we can really see the return, not just as a Ghanaian thing, but an African thing. So we are looking at multi-destination tourism marketing as a key ingredient of the Beyond the Return project, so that yes, come to Ghana, but come to Ghana and then end up in Togo, Benin, Nigeria, or connect to Rwanda, connect to any other parts of the continent that you will be comfortable in traveling to. And so we are looking at Ghana as really the gateway for Africa, using the Year of Return as the launch pad, trying to encourage everybody to come at least once a year to the continent. And you can always connect through Ghana. We are also looking at ways that we can build access to the various countries. I mean, a lot of people who said, oh, I wish when I come to Ghana, I could go to Cote d'Ivoire or Burkina Faso. So we are promoting maybe an African visa as a possibility, starting from West Africa. Recently, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement was signed, and Ghana is host of the AFTA Secretariat. Using that, we are hoping that we can use the same model for tourism, where if you got a visa to any African destination, you could then visit any African country of your choice. That way we can see multi-destination travel, people coming into Ghana and going to Rwanda, coming to Ghana and going to Kenya, or going to Kenya and coming to Ghana. Instead of coming to Ghana, going back to wherever you came from, and then getting another visa to visit another African country. It's one Africa. And so the Brand Africa project is part of the Beyond the Return initiative. We talked about capacity building. How do we make sure that our people back home on the continent understand the connections? And so when you come, you're not seen as a stranger, but you're coming into your people, you're coming into where you originated from. And so that connection means that we have to improve upon our service standards, customer service, understanding of what's the connection with the African diaspora is. And in terms of that, we're also looking at product development. Yes, the heritage sites are there, the slave castles are there, but what's next? What else can we provide? And so we have several other festivals that are coming up strongly. Afrochella, in the year 2019, we have Afro Nation. There are a few more and musical festivals that are happening along the coastlines that will be of interest to especially the second, third generation African diaspora who are not necessarily coming to connect just with the slave dungeons, but want to connect with Africa, our culture, our food, our music, and the way of life. And those are things that we are hoping that Beyond the Return will address. And so, yes, we are on it. COVID has slowed us down a bit, but we are very confident and very positive that we will get it back on track. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, it's very exciting. I can't wait to be back, you know, as soon as we're allowed. I'm going to toss that one back to Tomiko because I want to talk a little bit about how you think Ghana and the, you know, other countries, I'm going to say in West Africa, but I think on the continent as a whole, what can we do to better kind of foster this direct engagement, to really get the diaspora the information from West Africa, from Ghana, directly to our people to get us over? I know social media is a huge tool in that, but can you just talk a little bit about that sort of engagement, I'll say building bridges?
Yeah, I think that the continent needs to understand where Black people are spending their money. And it's on transportation, food, and lodging. And so with transportation being 28% of where the diaspora spends their money, how are we reaching them when we're talking about once you land? And the food and the culture, 23% spend money on food, and then another 15% is spent on shopping. So I think you have to understand where they're spending their money and then direct marketing, targeting those individuals, and then dispelling the myths about it's too long, it's a once in a lifetime trip. You know, people go to Europe year after year after year, and you don't ever hear people saying, oh, it's too long for me to get to the Amalfi Coast. You get on a however many hour, flight to Europe, and you never hear them saying, oh, it's a once in a lifetime. So I think we need to stop just thinking about Africa as a once in a lifetime trip. And as he just said, come year after year after year, the continent is telling people this is a once in a lifetime vacation. So they only think of it in that way. So how can we market to people and tell them to come year after year and then give them the things that they want? Give them the product development that they want, and not just focus on you got to come one time and be done. And so I think that is the main thing. I think people think of Africa as a one-time destination that I got to figure out where I'm going to go, which country I'm going to go to, and then I don't ever go back again. And that's a myth that needs to be debunked, that you can only go to Africa once.
Yeah, I totally agree with that one. And Jamie, just to piggyback, I think in the UK, Africa is just, in general doesn't have this sort of go once in your life status. I think you have slight flight and time zone advantage there. But if can you talk a bit about what this looks like for other markets, especially just because you're closer?
Well, similarly to what Tomiko just said, you have to understand where the Black consumer is spending their money. That's first. Research is really important. It's a key and critical source to really tapping into the diaspora market. I'd say perfect example, and kudos to the Ghana Tourism Authority. It's a real strategic plan that they have put in place, because one of the things that he mentioned first was that emotional connection. That's really important to how to get and when you talk about the emotional connection, I think there's a huge educational element there as well, because we're looking at that, as you said, that second and third generation who is removed from, might have that close cultural bond to the region. And then how do you kind of connect with them? So you have to educate them in terms of the importance, the history, the culture, because we aren't necessarily in the UK, we aren't really taught about Africa in the school system. So there's a huge disconnect. And unless you have parents who are, culturally aware and has put that into the kids, we've lost that connection with that third and fourth. So that emotional connection is really important and really key when kind of launching into that market. Another thing that they mentioned was, working with those grassroots communities and networks and groups. And I find that that can be a real vital source without even going into a huge advertising spend of really reaching and talking to the diaspora, because they're there, the networks are there. We just need to support them. We just need to give them the information that they require to really develop that. And that I find here in the UK market, that's one of the strongest ways to really enter and to speak to the diaspora market.
Which actually is the perfect segue into, going back to Harriet, we're talking about money and investment. What will be the key strategies to link diaspora travel to furthering sort of continental free trade business development, sort of more of that business development side? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. And, I am so excited. I talk about the African Continental Free Trade Area to everybody all the time, whether you know about them. I'm so excited because there's so much potential, and I can go on and on and on and on and on. But yeah, more of the marketing, but it's that stickiness. It's that stickiness that Akwesi was talking about. We want to talk about the beyond. We want to not just, educate folks and get them there for that one time. Most people don't know it's a 7-hour flight from DC or Boston to Cape Verde. 7-hour flight. Flights are cheap. But yeah, just to get on the continent, but it's that stickiness. Can I feel connected? Can I feel like I'm coming home? Am I welcome? And then introduce opportunities for investment. Investment, not just for investment's sake. Yes, there are lots of the diaspora who are moving back, who are retiring on the continent, who are, establishing farms and purchasing hotels and all of that. But really, it's still an untapped market. A lot of diaspora, as far as first and second generation families, have left the continent. Of course, we know, and there's that brain drain, have kind of stayed in the Americas or stayed in Europe. But we want to attract the first and second generations, as well as descendants of enslaved Africans back to the continent. And as I mentioned before, again, a longer conversation, yes, there are some countries that you can attain citizenship, dual citizenship by investing, $250,000 in hotels and things like that. For some countries don't allow that. But I'm sure if we continue to have this conversation and create that space and that opportunity, that could also create an opportunity for additional investment to definitely help the continent attain some of those goals. We need more infrastructure on the continent. We need more railways and things like that to connect the continent. And we need to continue to educate the diaspora, all of the diaspora, about the African Continental Free Trade Area and all of its possibilities. I'm so excited.
I love the excitement. This is great. Mimi, we talk a lot about, the diaspora coming back to Africa, but I know you touched on this before, let's talk about Africans traveling within Africa. And, how does this play a role? Because obviously a lot of us are coming because, the idea of going to a festival or a restaurant or a market and only seeing Black people is a huge draw to all of this. But how do you see this sort of, the young couple from Johannesburg spending a weekend in Lagos or a long weekend in Lagos? How does this all fit into that?
So what I was saying is that, for instance, I'll use Lagos as an example. Maybe people that are coming here for creative projects, it's mostly work and businesses. There's probably a bigger pool, mostly linked to work, I would say. You don't really find people just thinking, I just want to come and have a little getaway in Lagos and relax. And that isn't the norm per se. But then for us as Nigerians love travel, and we're happy to go anywhere that is affordable and is, because Lagos is described as a very intense energy. So anywhere that is positioned as a place of respite is welcomed, and I keep speaking about this. I don't know if it was December 2019, there was literally a mass exodus of Nigerians to Cape Verde when they launched the Cabo Verde Airlines from Lagos to Sal. So I feel that Africans want to travel across the continent. I think they're open to it. It's if they're shown that it's possible, and this country or this city, they're welcoming you and they're receiving you. Even loads of Nigerians now most December, they're going to Ghana after the year of the return. December in Lagos and also December in Accra. That's the marketing and how it's being positioned. So I feel that Africans are open to traveling across the continent, and I don't think it's seen as something that is reserved for only a specific amount of people. I think if they're shown that it's possible, these are the hotels, these are the restaurants, these are the people. Like it's just an education process. It's just showing people that this is what to do, this is what is available, this is how to do it. And if it's easier in terms of like visas, I keep going back to visas because it's very important. If it's easier in terms of visas to some countries, then that would also pull people to go there more and stuff like that. But I think there's an openness to it, and there's an eagerness to wanting to travel because, people want to discover more.
All right, Equazi, you can jump in on that one.
I think that that's an interesting one. If you look at, for example, the issue of inter-Africa travel, I think the key issue is access. Sometimes it's very difficult to move from one African country to the other. I mean, it's much, much, much easier relatively to probably jump on a flight to Europe than to get a flight to, let's say, any other African country. I mean, so once airline starts opening up the skies, opening up routes into other African countries. So traditionally, for example, if you look at South Africa, a lot of Africans going on vacation will go to Johannesburg or to Cape Town because of access, and vice versa. But if you wanted to connect to Maputo, you then have to do 2 or 3 stops, or you wanted to go to Zambia, you probably go to either Kenya or Ethiopia. So it's very, very difficult. And that's why for us in Ghana, we've been leading this West Africa integrated travel. I mean, between Ghana and Nigeria, for example, by road, you could do it to Lagos by 8 hours. But if you try it now, the roadblocks that you will encounter in, let's say, Togo, in Benin, but Seme and all those borders. And so we've been advocating the removal of all these artificial borders between countries so that those who cannot even afford the flights can also do road travels within West Africa. And then if there is access, we talked about Ghana and Lagos, Accra and Lagos, December in GH, December in Lagos. It's very easy. There are so many flights from Accra to Lagos, Accra to Abuja. So once the access is there, then people can then make that decision. And so in that state, the open skies, making sure the access is there, and also aggressively marketing to the destination. In Ghana, even within the year of return, the number 2 inbound arrivals was from Nigeria. So Nigeria for us is a significant market. And so in as much as we'll market to the African diaspora, to the Caribbean, to the US, Nigeria is a very significant market for us. We see a lot of leisure travel coming in from Nigeria, people coming to relax, coming in on weekends, events, business travel, and all those things. And so I think that is the next frontier, and we need to work together to ensure we are able to deliver that intra-Africa travel routes. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to open up a few just open questions. So I want to talk a little bit about the sort of misconception. So I think number one, and this is probably for my people in the US more, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions people have about traveling? I'm going to say Africa as a whole, which seems like a lot, but but what do you think the biggest misconceptions are?
Oh, well, I mean, we still are dealing with, bad media coverage. I mean, in addition to the distance, the distance is a factor. People figure they can jump on a 2 or 3 hour flight and be at their hotel in the Caribbean. So there's still that attraction to the Caribbean. And so saying that you're going to be on a flight for 10 hours or having to go through, depending on the cost of the flight, having to go to Europe or going to the Middle East to come back to Africa and things like that, that's a challenge for some. And then just awareness. Some people I think it was like Tomiko said, can't even imagine that once in a lifetime trip. So that's still a barrier that's a barrier that needs to, that we still need to address. Did I answer the question completely? Okay.
And I was telling the lady day before yesterday, I was in a travel group on Facebook and Africa Travel came up. And it ended up being like 500 comments where Black people were saying they felt uncomfortable going to Africa because Africans don't like Americans, African Americans. That is a stereotype.
I wasn't going to go there.
Yes.
I was trying not to go there with that. I was trying to go around it. But yes, I see that in social media. And that's what I'm saying, that these are the conversations that we need to have if we really want to boost the investment or just the relationship. I mean, we have, I'm sorry, I cut you off because I was going to say this because I was having this conversation as well. If we are sincere, if we really want to, we talk about, these courageous conversations, with as it relates to race. We talk about reparations. We're talking about reparations a lot in the United States, but we don't talk about that. We don't need reparations with different, with African countries, but we do need that healing time. I don't think I talked to some of my Ghanaian and friends, and they tell me that, before migrating to the United States, they knew nothing of what African Americans experienced, nothing at all, because it wasn't taught in schools. And we have limited information, so that we need to have those conversations, those healing conversations, so that we're not having these negative comments. Because I hear those comments as well, or they have negative experiences here in the United States. So getting beyond that, I think that would definitely boost travel. I'm sorry, Tamiko.
No, you're fine. And to piggyback off that, it's about educating African Americans, because these are people that have never even been to the continent before, that somehow somebody, great uncle, mama, granddaddy, somebody told them that this is the truth. And now they hang their truth on an untruth because they don't know. And so when you're thinking about, your marketing and who it is that you're trying to reach, I think honesty and saying we can be honest in our market. We don't have to say it like that, but we can be honest in our marketing materials so that people feel safe and feel welcome when they come, because that is really a huge myth that needs to be debunked.
What would that look like? I'm excited about that myth. I mean, you've had I'm trying to put you on the spot. What does that ad look like when you want to debunk a myth? Just throw something out. That sounds good. I like that. Somebody Black walking off an airplane from the US and open arms. We welcome you. And something as simple as that, as we welcome you. It's not, we don't look at you funny. We don't say, oh, you did this. And I think that is just a huge, it was literally over 500 comments from people that have never been to the continent before. So how can you make a blanketed statement?
I mean, added to campaigns, I think there will be a strong case for programs and initiatives that really do educate the wider community. I think alongside the marketing campaign needs to be that education. It's an educational marketing campaign, really, where we really have to work with the grassroots community organizations, like, and this, it goes back to my initial point about that symbiotic relationship between the high commissions and the tourist boards. That has to work simultaneously, because they are able then to channel out the information, and I go back to probably a picture that I had years ago, not 2 years ago or so, where it was, educating kids. So working with the high commissions to educate the children of those from the third and fourth, those from the third generation, and giving them a real authentic experience of a teaching experience of what a trip could be like. So you look at different things like culture and food, and you bring together, you have to start building that community within the side of source market. And I feel like that gives you a more authentic reach, and it also is a cheaper way of advertising and really reaching a large market, because we know it works. We saw how it worked with, I think, and I'm going to go back to use Ghana because that's probably one of the easiest case studies to use, how that works by not having to utilize, the the big media houses or white media to kind of push that the messaging out that you needed, but we utilize networks within our community to spread the message or to spread the word. And I think digital marketing, social media influencers, marketing plays a huge part in talking to that audience, and what that campaign looks like. Now we have so many Black travel creators. It's about connecting. And I'll give a funny story because I used to work, so I worked for the Caribbean Tourism Organization, and there, you know, it's the Caribbean Tourism Organization. You would assume that they had they had a relationship with the diaspora media, but they didn't. So one of the first things that I came in and saw and did was to kind of, we needed to build relationship with the diaspora media here in the UK market, you know, bring them, educate them about the Caribbean, you know, speak to them the same way you would speak to the mainstream media. So I think it's a mixture between a marketing campaign, an educational campaign, and then that PR, really speaking to our influencers who will spread the message throughout our communities.
I'm going to say thank you on behalf of the Africa Tourism Association and Naledi. Thank you all so much for joining from so many different time zones. And have a good evening, day, morning, whatever that looks like for you right now. Thank you.